The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Fantasy. Go into threads.times your entry with their pick 8 on the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and first time deposit offer up to $2 in bonus cash on Onyx Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Build your own betting model using their AI betting engine. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm, sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Saturday morning, roughly 11:50 a.m. Eastern Time, so right around noon on July 13th. I'm Rose, as always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to officially wrap up Wimbledon. It is the final Wimbledon episode that we're going to have. It is time to get into the men's final taking place on Sunday between Alcaraz and Djokovic. So we're going to preview that match in a second. Before we get to any of that, though, I do want to take care of some housekeeping. I want to remind everyone to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, a reminder, don't forget to review the podcast on Spotify or Apple. So no matter how you consume the podcast, you can show support. So leave some feedback. I think we are at 315 subscribers right now on YouTube. So once again, if you could help that number, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you are still listening to it on Spotify or Apple, that's okay too. But don't forget to leave some feedback by leaving a review. Also, a reminder, don't forget to check out the SGPN merch store, because we do have a lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have shirts, sweatshirts, and mugs. Actually wearing a shirt right now, so this is what one of the shirts looks like. Very comfortable. Definitely recommend. Either way, though, we do have a different amount. We have a couple of choices when it comes to color as well. So you have some options. Recommend checking out the merch store, not just for the tennis show, but also for other podcasts. And the feature show for this week is actually the Propcast with Munaf and Chris. They get you ready for the NFL season. And they have awards episodes. They have season-long prop episodes, everything you need for the upcoming NFL season. They already have out, so you can check out some early betting options for the actual NFL season by going to the Propcast. Also, a reminder to check out the Bottom Line Bombs with CJ Sullivan and his road to $10 million. Tune in wherever you do get your podcast, or you could actually listen to it on the SGPN app. Anyway, time to start off with the actual recap of the last episode. So for the actual episode, we're going to recap briefly the women's final that happened on Saturday morning. Then we'll preview the men's semifinal matches that happened a day or two ago. Then we'll actually preview the men's final between Alcaraz and Djokovic, starting off with the actual lock and dog picks. Another sweep. Ended up sweeping the men's semifinal episode, and then we parlayed that into a sweep of the women's final episode. For the lock, we had Krejcikova and Paolini over 21.5 games at -138. Never in doubt. Thought there was a couple ways to get there. Either you'd have one competitive set, or it would go 3 and it went 3. You had 2 lopsided sets in the first 2 sets, with each player winning one. So it was never in doubt. Nice, easy winner there on the lock. For the dog, we had a nice win with Krejcikova money line with the most aces. A combo at +125 on DraftKings. Definitely a bit of a sweat there because A, the match was very competitive and Krejcikova did win the final set 6-4. B, Krejcikova only had 1 ace entering the third set and had 5 aces in the third set. So she flipped a switch and started hitting some bombs. Point is, though, ended up turning a -135 favorite into a +125 dog with the aces combo. And I was never really worried about the aces. I figured that Paolini would finish with around 2 or 3, finish with 3, but Krejcikova got the job done as she ended up with, I think, 6 as her official total. But nice sweep once again. Hopefully we'll make it 3 in a row with the Wimbledon men's final on a Sunday. Now, to recap the actual match in itself, I do want to point out that the match was competitive, but we kind of called it to a T, where we thought that Krejcikova would just have a bit too many free points with the first serve, and that's what happened, as Krejcikova ended up winning the first serve point percentage in comparison to Paolini. So she won that battle, and that was kind of the deciding factor in the third set. Now, Krejcikova did have to fight off some break points while she was serving it out in the 5-4 game, but she eventually converted and got the job done. So good for her. And good for us because we swept everything again. I do want to quickly recap her resume because I feel like people don't realize how successful Krejcikova's been in her tennis career, and I kind of wanted to give her some flowers for winning Wimbledon and for really her entire career. So Krejcikova at this point is 28 years old, and you would have thought she was older based on how many wins she's actually had. So to go through her singles resume, she has made the quarters in all 4 Grand Slams. She won the French Open in 2021, and now she added her second Grand Slam singles title in Wimbledon in 2024. So that's a solid start to her career. However, people don't realize how good she is at doubles, and I feel like the point I'm trying to make here is that she's a guaranteed future tennis Hall of Famer, and I want to give her some credit. So in Grand Slam doubles, she won the Australian Open title twice. She won the French Open title twice. She won Wimbledon twice, and she won the U.S. Open once. So she does have the career Grand Slam in doubles, and she has 7 doubles Grand Slam titles for the women's side. Then she also won the mixed doubles title 3 times in the Australian Open, and she also won the Olympic doubles championship and the Tour's final doubles championship. So she has won everything you can imagine, basically, besides a U.S. Open singles title and besides an Australian Open a singles title. But that's a ton of silverware and just overall accolades in her trophy case already. And she's only 28. So I wanted to mention it. Good for her. Feel like she's been an underrated singles player for a while, and she's been a phenomenal doubles player for a long time. So congrats to her. She was going to make the Hall of Fame anyway, but now she has a Wimbledon title, and that's definitely going to officially cement her Hall of Fame legacy. Maybe she'll end up winning a couple more. Who knows? But good for her. I think she was like 150 to 1 pre-tournament to win Wimbledon. So second straight year, you've had an insane 150 to 1 shot, basically win it, as Vondrousova got the job done last year. And now you have another Czech joining her with Krajicova, who ended up winning at about 150 to 1 as well. So props to her and her Hall of Fame resume. Just wanted to give her some flowers before we moved on. So nothing else really add for the women's final. Wanted to, I guess, express some condolences towards Paolini, who lost a Grand Slam final for the second time in about a month and a half. So not ideal with Paolini losing in the final in back-to-back Grand Slams. Still a great effort by her, though. Just unfortunately fell a bit short both times. Moving on, though, to the recap of the men's semifinal episode and the men's semifinal actual matches. So going through those, we ended up sweeping those picks as well because we ended up having Alcaraz minus 1.5 sets, and we also had Djokovic to win in straight sets at plus money, and that got there. Now, with that being the case, really not much to fully dive into because our breakdown of those matches was basically 100% accurate. We thought Alcaraz would win in 4, and he did against Medvedev, and then we thought Djokovic would win in straight sets, a competitive straight sets win against Musetti, and that's exactly what happened, as each set was either 6-4 or 7-6. So starting off with Alcaraz, simply put, I just think he's a really bad matchup for Medvedev, which is why I thought that Alcaraz was going to win. I don't want to say comfortably, but I was never really concerned about seeing Medvedev win 2 sets. I played out all the scenarios in my head, and I really just thought Medvedev, best case scenario, was winning a set. And that's exactly what happened. So I feel like it's one of those head-to-head matchups where after the U.S. Open matchup last year, where Medvedev actually won in 4 sets, people were going to suddenly think Medvedev was a lot more competitive in the head-to-head than he actually was against Alcaraz. And I feel like this is one of those head-to-head matchups where you might fast forward 5 years or so, and Alcaraz is up like 13-3 in the head-to-head. I really think Alcaraz has a massive winning chance against Medvedev every time they play. And I think Medvedev is really not equipped, I'd say, well enough with his actual skill set to beat Alcaraz on a regular basis, besides the random occasional fluke win that we got in the U.S. Open last year. But Alcaraz is better than him. And simply put, he's got more variety, more talent, and I feel like his overall net skills and his overall feel with the drop shots and everything are just too much for Medvedev to handle. And I do think at the end of the day, Alcaraz will always find opportunities against Medvedev service games where Medvedev might not always find the same opportunities against Alcaraz's service games. Look good early, though, in the first set. He was actually standing closer to the return baseline as I thought he would, and that's how he ended up winning the first set. Kind of got Alcaraz off guard in the first set. Then Alcaraz adjusted, and Medvedev stopped breaking after that. But the point is, Alcaraz was really never in danger after the first set, and it felt like he was kind of cruising from that point forward. So not a shock there. But Alcaraz against Medvedev, I will pretty much always take Alcaraz in those matchups in the future. So keep that in mind. I just think when you were watching that Wimbledon match as well, a lot of similarities to a lot of the lopsided wins Alcaraz has had in the past. Medvedev does not really have enough answers for the Alcaraz questions, and it does feel like Alcaraz has all the answers to the Medvedev questions. So, yeah, not exactly shocked that's how the match unfolded. As for the other Semifinal matchup, Djokovic won in straight sets. Was not convincing, but he got the job done. He ended up getting broken serving for the first set. Then he broke back immediately to win the first set. Then he went down a break in the second set. Then he broke back and eventually won the second set in a breaker, and then ended up winning the third set in a 6-4 scoreline, while he also had to fight off some break points, or a break point, in the final service game. He had three match points, though, in the 3-5 service game, could not convert. So Djokovic made it a bit of an adventure, but eventually he converted on his fourth match point. So overall, I thought Djokovic looked fine. I'm not going to tell you that he looked otherworldly. I know he won in straight sets, so it's kind of nitpicking, but I have to at least mention it because you're going up against Alcaraz next round. I thought Djokovic was fine. I thought that Musetti had some opportunities. It felt like Musetti was just unable to win a couple of big points that were, I'd say, culminating in long rallies, and it just felt like Djokovic won the big points more often than not. Now, Musetti had chances, and I thought Musetti played well. It wasn't like one of those straight set losses where the guy clearly didn't play well. Musetti looked fine. I just thought that Djokovic was a bit too solid. He served and volleyed a ton. I thought he would in this matchup, and he did, and he got a bunch of free points out of it. So Musetti played well, made a very solid run to the semis. Props to him, but unfortunately, Djokovic was too solid. But good for us, he ended up cashing our straight sets bet. So nothing else to really recap. Once again, wasn't going to spend too much time recapping the semis because our lock and dog picks basically covered exactly what happened in the matchups because we got everything right. So with that being the case, we got the matchup we wanted when the tournament started, basically. Either Sinner versus Djokovic in the final or either Alcaraz and Djokovic in the final, and we got option B. So point is, I do think this should be a fun matchup. I'll preview that in a second. But before we continue that, do want to remind you once again that you're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy because their Pick 8 is live. Great entries up to 8 picks. And Underdog will automatically double flex your entries to miss up to 2 picks and still win your entry. With more picks to make and extra ways to win, the excitement's higher than ever. Best part can now win up to 325 times the original amount. You can now use specials and boosts on all flex entries. I'll keep using the higher Caitlin Clark assists and the higher Angel Reese rebounds on all my entries moving forward, especially the assists for Caitlin, which have been insane lately. I think she had 13 last night. Point is, though, don't miss out on your chance before it's gone. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim our special for getting first time deposit offer up to $2 bonus cash on Fantasy, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Circa Survivor and Circa Millions. Circa Sports is back with Circa Survivor and Circa Millions, giving away $16 million in guaranteed prizes. And of course, Circa contests have no rake. Circa Millions, pick 5 NFL teams ATS each week and compete for $6 million or survive the NFL Gauntlet and NFL Survivor to claim the $10 million prize. Sign up in person at Circa Sports between now and September 7th and use a proxy to play from anywhere. We even have a deal with footballcontestproxy.com to save you $50 with promo code SGP. Don't have a trip booked yet for Las Vegas before football. Ultimate Contest Weekend's a great time to go. Hang out with Ryan and Sean and enjoy some of the open bar events of the world's best sportsbook from August 22nd through the 24th. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping the men's semifinal matches from a couple days ago and the women's final that happened today. Now it's time to get into the preview of the men's final between Alcaraz and Djokovic. Bit of deja vu because we saw this matchup last year. A reminder, Alcaraz did win last year in 5 sets in a thriller. So hopefully the match on a Sunday is going to be as good as the match was last year. For the actual betting lines here, Alcaraz is a favorite to repeat as he's around minus 145. You have Djokovic at around plus 125. For the game spread, you have Alcaraz minus 1.5, Djokovic plus 1.5. For the over-under, you have around 40.5 or 41. For the actual set spread, you have Alcaraz minus 1.5 sets at plus 145. Djokovic minus 1.5 sets is plus 225. Djokovic plus 1.5 sets, though, is minus 175. The over 3.5 sets is around minus 240, give or take. The under 3.5 sets is plus 195. Match to go to 5 sets is plus 200. Now, for the head-to-head, it is tied 3-3. So they have had a couple of wars. In fact, 5 of the 6 meetings have not ended in straight sets. So you can generally expect at least one set apiece for each player. And at that point, you might end up getting a marathon match. But you've not seen many, if any, head-to-head sweeps. And you have seen a straight set win by Djokovic in the ATP Finals last year, 6-3, 6-2. That's the only one. Faced off in an exhibition event this year, or last year, I mean, that ended up ending in 3 sets. Cincinnati last year was probably the best 3-set match ever played, and Djokovic won that one in 3. Last year's Wimbledon went 5. Roland Garros ended up going 4. Djokovic won. Probably was headed 5, and then Alcaraz started cramping, and then at that point, Djokovic buried him. Faced off, though, in Madrid in the first ever meeting. Alcaraz did win that one in 3. So, point is, once again, every match besides one has been an absolute war. So, if you want to go based on the head-to-head history, that's probably the angle. You want to consider the over, and you want to consider potentially the over 3.5 sets or maybe even over 4.5 sets and expect a full-on war. Now, for the actual matchup itself, I do want to mention the actual path of both players because Djokovic has dropped only 2 sets in the entire event, but his path has been significantly easier just based on who he's had to face off against. So he ended up beating Capriva in the first round, a bit of an unknown. Capriva's not very good, and Djokovic only lost 5 games in the entire match. Beat Fernley in 4, which looked like it was going to be straightforward. Then Fernley actually made it a very competitive match in the final 2 sets, as Djokovic and Fernley split 2 separate 7-5 sets, as Djokovic ended up winning that one in 4 with a 7-5 in the fourth. Then he lost the first set to Papiron, and then since that point, he's not dropped a set. Ended up beating Papiron in 4. Then he ended up beating Rune in straight sets. Then he had a bye because you ended up seeing de Minaur get injured, and Djokovic got a free path into the semis. Then he faced off against Musetti in the semis, and he won that one in straight sets. So Djokovic's path has been favorable, extremely favorable, because his hardest opponent was probably Rune, based on ranking. De Minaur I'm not counting because he didn't play against. De Minaur got injured. And Musetti was a Cinderella dream run into the semis. So the point is, Djokovic has not really been fully tested by elite competition. I know Rune is a fringe top 10 guy. He's fine on grass, not known for being an amazing grass player, but that is the hardest opponent he's had to face based on ranking. So Djokovic has not really been battle tested, which you could argue is either good or bad, because it might be good because he was battling a knee issue entering the event, and he had a pretty easy path to the final, and he also had a day off that he was not expecting, with de Minaur not showing up. So he did have some extra rest time leading up to the Musetti match. And with him only having to go 3 sets in that matchup, you could argue that Djokovic is in a good spot because his knee should be, I'd say, in a good place right now. However, the other counterpoint would be Djokovic hasn't played anybody, and Alcaraz, so Djokovic might be in trouble. You can kind of argue from both sides of the coin. The question is, I feel like you're going to find out the answer once the match is over. But if I had to give my initial thought on that, I'd say dilemma, I'm leaning more to B. I think Djokovic might be in trouble. Now, I think Djokovic has done all he needed to do. It's not his fault that everybody who was highly ranked in his section or in his overall half ended up losing. That's not his fault. However, he did have a pretty easy draw going in with Sinner and with Alcaraz on the opposite side of the bracket. But Hurkacz ended up losing early on. You saw de Minaur not be healthy enough to actually play against him. De Minaur maybe could have made that match interesting. But I do think Alcaraz is a serious step up in competition. And with Alcaraz beating him last year, I think that bodes well for Alcaraz. Now, looking at Alcaraz's path, he's had a much harder time as he has dropped at least 1 set in 4 straight matches. However, his path has been harder than Djokovic's, and it's really not even close. So to go through the actual path, beat Lajal in the first round, who's a relative unknown youngster from Estonia, pretty solid player, but at the end of the day, Alcaraz did win in straight sets. Competitive, though, with a 7-6 and a 7-5 before he coasted 6-2 in the final set. Then he beat Vukic in the second round in straight sets. Vukic, not an amazing player. He's fine on grass, though. Point is, though, that was a competitive match because Alcaraz was losing, actually, down a break in the first set and came back and won in straight sets. But Vukic is still a more well-known guy than Fernley, for example, for drawing comparisons. Beat Tiafoe in 5. I know Tiafoe is not had a great year. Still a decent grass player. Think he made I'm trying to remember, the round of 16 and then lost to Goffin, I think, in 5 a couple of years ago. But Tiafoe's a decent grass player. Still a pretty disappointing showing by Alcaraz because he was down 2 sets to 1. But he got the job done as he won in 5. Then he beat Humbert. Humbert's had a pretty good year in general. Humbert's a top 20 guy. You're looking at Tommy Paul, who's in great form, fresh off a grass title, and beating Bublik and Agut in straight sets, and he won in 4 there. And then he beat Medvedev, who's a top 5 player in the world, in 4 sets. So Alcaraz is easily the more battle-tested guy, beating Medvedev, a top 5 player in the world, beating Paul in great form, and beating Humbert in back-to-back-to-back matches. So I do think Alcaraz, despite losing more sets than Djokovic, has actually looked better just based on the overall eye test. I know the eye test can be dangerous because I know some of it's matchup dependent, but Alcaraz has looked very good in a bunch of these matches. The issue is he's been a bit of a slow starter, as Alcaraz has dropped the first set in particular in 3 of his last 4 matches. So we'll see how he looks. In fact, Alcaraz has gone to a breaker or a 7-5 in every match here except for the Humbert match. Every other match in Wimbledon has been a 7-5 or 7-6. So maybe you might get another marathon first set if you want to go for a unique angle. Maybe a first set breaker can be in the cards. But I do think you're looking at what should be a fun match. I'm not picking either guy to win in straight sets. I know that's not a hot take because over 3.5 sets is about minus 240. I'm not picking Alcaraz or Djokovic to win comfortably. I think it will be a competitive matchup. Now, with that being the case, I think Alcaraz is a worthy favorite. I think Alcaraz has looked like the best player here, just based on the eye test and just watching these matches unfold. Djokovic has been fine. He has not dropped a set in the last 3 rounds, technically, last 2 matches, because de Minaur once again did not actually play in the quarters. But I think Djokovic has gotten a very easy draw. I think Alcaraz has struggled at times, but against good competition. And I think Alcaraz, in my opinion, has looked like the best player in the entire event. So I am going to go with Alcaraz to win. I think it's going to be close. I think Alcaraz wins probably in 4 or 5. But Djokovic, I feel like at the end of the day, as a Djokovic fan, he's my favorite player of all time. Having said that, in 2024, I think we're at the point in their respective careers where Alcaraz is better than Djokovic. Nothing wrong with it. Alcaraz is in his low 20s. We know that he is the future face of the sport. I think we've reached the point where I don't want to say the baton or the torch has officially been passed over to Alcaraz, but it does feel like based on this year, Djokovic having no titles, Alcaraz winning the French Open and winning a couple of titles, I think Alcaraz is the better player on any given night compared to Djokovic right now in their careers, which is nothing, nothing wrong with that. Djokovic is past his prime, still capable of winning Grand Slam titles because we're here in a Grand Slam final. But I think we'd all agree Alcaraz, with his current form right now, the French Open title into Wimbledon, I think he's the better player at this point in time. So for me, I'm going to go with Alcaraz. I am going to win to the over, though. I think you might get a breaker, maybe 2. Should be a fun match, should be competitive, but I think Alcaraz has been the better player in this event, and I think he's the better player right now. So give me Alcaraz to get the job done in this matchup. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual men's final preview. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks, but before we get into any of the actual picks, do want to remind you once again, they are brought to you by Rhythm, because Rhythm is a great place to help you with your player prop needs. Rhythm's a go-to sports betting tool that transports complex data into actual insights, empowering bettors with smarter data-driven decisions. Unlike other platforms, Rhythm combines predictive analytics with an intuitive user experience, making betting both easier and more enjoyable. The predictive models are from the brains of MIT data scientists and quants with over 3 years of data to help drive you to better backbend decisions. They've also had great projections in WNBA and golf, so check that out as well. Claim your 7-day free trial today by going to sportscampodcast.com. Search them, sportscampodcast.com/RITHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the men's final between Alcaraz and Djokovic. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I'm going to warn you right now, there is some overlap between the lock and dog. For the lock, I am going to go with Alcaraz on the money line at minus 143. If you want to go for the spread at minus 1.5, I like minus 105. I don't hate it, but I'm going to play it safe, and I am going to go with Alcaraz to win the match in general at minus 143. Now, a reminder, last year, Alcaraz did the impossible. Djokovic had not lost at Wimbledon since July 2017. It had been roughly 6 years, and Alcaraz went in there, and you might remember, immediately got destroyed in the first set. He lost the first set 6-1 in that matchup. So Alcaraz was given almost an impossible task of beating Djokovic in his kingdom, basically, in Wimbledon on center court, and then he immediately dropped the first set 6-1 in about 30-something minutes. And I'm sure a lot of you thought, including myself, maybe Alcaraz is going to get buried here. Maybe he's not ready for the moment. Maybe Djokovic is just too good. And Alcaraz came back, and he ended up winning in 5. So Alcaraz has been at this spot before. You could argue that the win last year might be harder than the win this year because Djokovic was in great form. He had no injuries, and Djokovic also was once again unbeaten in Wimbledon for about 6 years, give or take, and Alcaraz pulled it off. So Alcaraz is not going to be nervous because he's been here before, and I do think with him winning the head-to-head meeting in Wimbledon last year, that should definitely help him with his confidence because he's once again gotten the job done against his opponent before. Now, Alcaraz, I think, has been better throughout the entire event, despite dropping more sets because he's faced better competition, beating the likes of Medvedev in the last round, beating Tommy Paul in great form, and beating Humbert. Djokovic hasn't really beaten anybody. He beat Rune, who I think we all know is a head case, but he beat him in straight sets. Musetti was a straight set win, was not that easy, and he was pretty fortunate to face off against Musetti in the semifinals of a Grand Slam, especially on grass. But the point is, it's kind of similar to my breakdown of the Krejcikova match against Paolini. I ended up picking Krejcikova to win because I was impressed by her facing off against very tough competition, beating Rybakina, beating Ostapenko, and beating Collins in back-to-back matches, while Paolini had a pretty easy draw facing off against Vekic, for example, in the semis. I just thought that it was a good overall spot for Krejcikova to get the job done, and that worked out. So I'm going to apply the same philosophy to Alcaraz in this matchup. I think he's the better player right now. I think he's looked at the better player against better competition. That's good enough for me. If I had to price the money line myself, initially, I thought Alcaraz would be minus 140. If I had to actually price it, that's what I thought the odds makers would do. If I had to price it myself, I'd have Alcaraz at minus 170. I think Alcaraz is a worthy favorite here. And I initially, watching Djokovic actually beat Musetti, I initially was all over Alcaraz. I thought Alcaraz would win, and I'm going to stick with it. So give me Alcaraz to get the job done at minus 143 as my lock. Now, for the overlap, I am going to take Alcaraz to win again. So Djokovic winning, we automatically lose these two plays. But I do like Alcaraz quite a bit in this matchup. I am going to go with Alcaraz to win the match with both players to win a set, and that pays out a plus 140 on Caesars. We've done very well with this market so far in the event, and we're going to take it one last time. 6 career head-to-head meetings. 5 of them did not end in straight sets. You are expecting Djokovic to not leave empty-handed. I do think Djokovic will win at least one set in this matchup. Then I think Alcaraz eventually will settle in and will flip a switch once again and look like the best player on the court. Now, last year's Wimbledon final went to 5 sets. Competitive matchup. Alcaraz responded well to adversity, and he got the job done. He's legit. We know he's the future face of the sport, and I do think with last year's matchup going 5, this matchup should go at least 4, in my opinion. Now, Alcaraz has also dropped at least one set in 4 straight. So he has not been, I'd say, dominant from the get-go, and he has dropped a couple of first sets. But I do think Alcaraz eventually will settle in, and I think eventually he'll be able to outlast Djokovic in some of these long points. But I do think looking at the overall head-to-head and looking at the recent form of both players, I think Alcaraz will win, but I'm not picking straight sets. I think Djokovic is good enough on grass, obviously, being arguably the best grass player of all time, to win at least one set in this matchup. So I am going to go with kind of a repeat of last year's final. Maybe not 5 sets. Maybe this one only goes 4. But give me Alcaraz to win with both players to win a set as my dog. So once again, the picks for the men's final, the final episode of Wimbledon, because we're going to have a bunch of tournaments coming up next week. You have Alcaraz as the lock on the money line at minus 143. If you want the spread at minus 1.5, like minus 105, I don't hate that either, but I'm going to play it safe and go with the money line instead. For the dog, though, I am going to go with Alcaraz again, but I'm going to take both players to win a set, and that combo pays out a plus 140 on Caesars. That's going to wrap it up for the men's final and for Wimbledon. Hopefully we sweep the last 3 episodes because we ended up sweeping the men's semis and the women's final. So hopefully we make it a hat trick and win the 2 picks here for the Sunday match. A reminder, though, for next week, we have a ton of tournaments. For whatever reason, we have not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 ATP events going on next week. So I'm going to try to do all of the outrights probably in one episode. I could break it up into 2 in theory, so we'll see what happens, actually, because I might end up turning in either a 1-hour episode or maybe 2 separate 20, 30-minute episodes. We'll see. But you have Hamburg, which is a 500 event, so that's going to have the best competition based on overall importance and prize money. That should have the best overall competition. I think Zverev's in there with like Baez, and I think Rune's in there too. You have Newport, which is one of the final grass events of the year. I think it is the final grass event. Should be a fun one. That is one of my favorite grass events of the entire year. They're going to preview that as well. Then we have Gustad and Bustad. But 4 events, 3 250s, and a 500 in the same week. So expect a lot of chaos post-Wimbledon. We're going to have players withdrawing from the events, which is why I'm going to try to wait it out and try to get the last, the most up-to-date info on who's actually in the event beforehand. But should be fun. 4 tournaments to preview for the next episode should be coming out probably Sunday or Monday. early Monday morning. Until next time, though, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the WNBA show as well. And find me on the MLB show as well. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.